The House Oversight Committee will come to order. Would the clerk please take attendance?
Chair DeBoyer.
Here.
Representatives Bierlein.
Here.
Meerman.
Here.
Paquette.
Here.
Kara.
Here.
Bruck.
Present.
Green. Regis. Shriver. Wolford. Miller.
Here.
Pohutsky.
Here.
Conlon.
Here.
McDonald.
Here.
Menser.
Here.
Cerniglu.
Here.
Wagella.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 16 members present, a quorum.
Thank you. Representative Cerniglu moves to approve the minutes of the September 9th meeting. Hearing no objections, they're approved. I would ask the clerk to read a letter from the Speaker of the House appointing alternate members to the House Oversight Committee.
Dear Mr. Clerk, I appoint the following members of the 103rd Legislature to serve as alternate members of the Oversight Committee. Representatives Brian Posthumous, Douglas Wozniak, Sarah Leitner, Alicia St. Germain, Karen Whitsett. Sincerely, Matt Hall, Speaker of the House, 42nd District.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So what we're doing here is we are voting on the adoption of some additional language of the House Oversight Committee rules. The amendment to the rules will lay out the procedure for the elevation and participation of alternate members whom the Speaker appointed, as the clerk had just read, to the Oversight Committee. I think everybody has those rules before them. Specifically, you're going to see it at Rule 6, which is the alternate members. And first thing I do is, if there's any questions or open for discussion, I would open it. Yep, Minority Vice Chair Miller.
Thank you so much, Chair. Regarding these rules, I will be a no vote on this change. And most respectfully,
Sure.
the rules I don't feel strengthen the accountability. And this is a very important body here, and I take oversight very seriously, as all of you do. But the people that are appointed to the committee should be here, committed to show up and do the work. And I absolutely think that when you add alternates, the work is compromised. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we will move into Representative Regis moves to approve the amended House Oversight Committee rules. Mr. Clerk, would you take the vote?
On the motion to adopt the proposed rule, Chair DeBoyer.
Yes.
Representatives Bierlein.
Yes.
Meerman.
Yes.
Paquette.
Yes.
Kara.
Yes.
Bruck.
Yay.
Green. Regis.
Yes.
Shriver.
Yay.
Wolford. Miller.
No.
Pohutsky.
No.
Conlon.
No.
McDonald.
No.
Menser.
No.
Cerniglu.
No.
Wagella.
No.
Mr. Chair, you have 8 yeas, 7 nays, 1 pass. The motion prevails.
For the remainder of the meeting, we are going to hear testimony from a couple of individuals. First, we're going to hear from the Monroe County Sheriff, Troy Goodnough. We're going to talk about some of the things that we had heard at a previous committee hearing from the Department of Health and Human Services with regard to a case that we're all probably rather familiar with, rather disturbing in my opinion. And we're going to get a little bit of clarity, a little bit of more information, have the opportunity to ask some questions from Sheriff Goodnough. So Sheriff Goodnough, if you would not mind coming up. Sheriff, I appreciate you taking the time to come to Lansing. I'm certain your schedule is busy, but I do think that the way that we address and handle some of the most vulnerable among us is an important topic. So I will open the floor to you for a minute here to give us a little bit of just an opening on an angle or your thoughts on the current circumstances. And if you don't mind, I will open it up to the committee to maybe ask you some questions on that topic.
Absolutely, Chair, and thank you. I'm honored to be here today. As the Sheriff of Monroe County, my job is to be the voice for victims, those including children that can't speak for themselves. I'm happy to provide clarity or answer any questions you have related to this matter. I come here today with one particular matter in hand, but I will tell you, like a number of my colleagues across the state, there are many, many more incidents of this nature or lack of service thereof. I will tell you, we've had good outcomes as a result of the Monroe County Sheriff's Office intervention into this one particular case, but there's still more work to be done. So thank you.
You bet. Thanks, Sheriff. Casey, would you run a clip for us? Because I have a little bit I'd like to drill down on this.
The materials that we have on the investigations don't match the things that you're saying.
So this is a statement by the director with regard to the information as we understood it. And I believe that the information as we understood it was from a report from your office to a degree. So, you know, your office has responded to this, had responded to this multiple times on the reports of children living in a tent or under a tarp in a tent and in a car. That's correct. I mean, first of all, that's the basic what circumstances there was. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, sir, and if I could expand just a little further.
Sure.
Our first engagement with this family was November 30th of 2023. Our second engagement with this family was December 10th of 2024. And our third engagement with this family was April 16th of 2025. Each case documented in a written Sheriff's Office official report. CPS was notified each time with a documented intake number, but more importantly, it was all documented on body-worn camera.
So the living in a tent under a tarp, on a mattress on the ground, a small space heater, no plumbing, kids not in school, all of that is accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay. As an elected law enforcement officer, as an elected sheriff, you know, what are your obligations and what's your ethical responsibilities or the duties when you see things like these kinds of living conditions?
Well, I want to make it clear, it's just not this incident. Our work at the Sheriff's Office, we value everything we do. We take every complaint seriously, and then we investigate it fully. In this particular case, there's a state agency that is supposed to take the lead on this once we notify them. They failed 3 times. 3 times.
So CPS shows up. They see the same things that you just testified to. They see these conditions. And they deem it adequate? Like, what goes through your mind when you hear that Child Protective Services has deemed it adequate? Like, what?
I'm going to sum it up, and I'm going to be very candid. Would you allow your children or your grandchildren to live in those conditions? It's a simple yes or no. Thank you. And that should drive the outcome of this case on November 30th of 2023. And if Director Hertel can answer me that question, I'd like to have it.
I don't know if you'll know the answer to this or not, but I'm going to ask it. Do you know how many times you had to contact CPS before they responded to that scene?
I do not, and I just want the committee to be aware of, I was not aware of the situation on November 30th of 2023. I was unaware of the situation on December 10th of 2024. I was made aware of it briefly on December 11th of 2024 as a follow-up communication from our shift commander, but it was clear that CPS was involved, them being the state agency. I became directly involved on April 16th of 2025 when I had a shift lieutenant and a shift sergeant come into my office in tears and said, "Sheriff, this is the 3rd time and we cannot get any response from CPS. What do we do?" You know what they did? The sergeant and I are members of the same church. They called our church, said CPS won't help us. Is there any money available to put these folks up until we can get some more engagement? Again, all documented, folks, on body-worn camera. So anybody that says it's not true, ask for the video. My door's open for anybody in the state of Michigan or outside that would like to ask. Come visit me. We'll share anything we have with you. Like I tell everybody, I'm held accountable by the citizens that elected me. Who are they held accountable to?
Is it safe to say that they didn't take any real action on this case?
If there was real action on November 30th of 2023, would we have a conversation today? Or would we be at April 16th of 2025? I'd hedge my bet and say not.
Wow. I do have another clip I'd like to play just to get
The
your-
material,
You're saying that our information doesn't match. That would mean that you have not been in communication with Sheriff Goodnough about this case? Because this information came from Sheriff Goodnough.
I understand it came from Sheriff Goodnough. I have the information on the CPS investigation.
Okay, I would suggest that you would look at it then.
So when the communication was made to CPS, to what degree would you say they moved, swiftly? Did they take it serious? Did they respond in a manner that you would have expected Child Protective Services to respond?
Sir, I can't analyze whether they took it seriously or what their emotional response was to it, but I'll repeat it again. The outcome was clearly unfavorable. And I have a real problem with Director Hertel. I don't think there's anybody in the state of Michigan that doesn't know how to get a hold of a sheriff. She didn't call, hey, Sheriff, can we have a conversation? Can I seek clarification? Can you share with me? I'd have made every investigator that was involved in this case available to her. She wouldn't have had to subpoena him. She wouldn't have had to do nothing. Come to my office, we'll put it out there. When somebody calls my office, and I'm confident that Rep. Miller can attest to this, and says, hey, Sheriff, I have questions on how something was handled, the first thing I do is call them back and say, let's sit down, let's find out. If we made a mistake, we correct it.
Yes,
We
you're on
correct
speed
it.
dial.
Pardon me?
Yes, you're on speed dial. Yes, and you return my calls.
Absolutely. And we're still here today. I asked the director, where are these children at today? Does she know? I know. I know where mom's at.
Representative Regas, did you have
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sheriff Goodnough, for coming back. We appreciated your testimony in the subcommittee, very much so, and this case is just shocking. And obviously, when I also asked Director Hertel if she would allow her own children to live in that condition, just as you said that same question a few minutes ago. It's a yes or no answer, and she refused to answer it after several attempts. So I just wanted to ask you just a couple questions there. So your department ultimately got those children out of that living condition, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I believe we heard the opposite in our main oversight when Hertel was here. I believe that she said she got them out of that living condition. So I just wanted to clarify that there. So what was it like trying to communicate with CPS during all of this? Did they move swiftly to address any danger? I mean, we already know they didn't. Did you hear anything back at all from CPS or anything regarding these kids?
No, ma'am. Unless I make a phone call and check in with the mother, we hear nothing.
And you shared information with CPS regarding the case, and you also provided them updates throughout the course of the investigation, right?
As we conducted our numerous investigations, yes, ma'am.
Okay. How did you communicate with CPS?
In the case, excuse me, if in the final, I'm going to go refer back to, if you don't mind, please, April 16th is When they did get involved, when I made a phone call and basically said this is unacceptable behavior, then they became involved. There was a caseworker that then coordinated with our shift commanders, and we let them know what was happening and that there was assistance, temporary assistance, through Trinity Lutheran Church in Monroe to get them temporary housing until they could deem appropriate housing or secure appropriate housing.
Is by email or phone?
Pardon me?
Did you communicate by email or phone?
That was my staff that I know communicated by phone a number of times.
Okay, all right. If you wouldn't mind, I would like to know the names of the people associated. You don't have to say it here, but if you could provide those names for me of the CPS workers that you dealt with, I would appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Do you want that directly to you, ma'am, or do you want? it
Yes,
to Rep.
just
Ruck, or-
directly to my office, please. Thank you.
Let me ask Casey to play another slide here, just for the sake of comment.
I am unfamiliar with the exact resources that mom was referred to initially.
Representative Bruck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sheriff Goodnough, for being here today. Appreciate your willingness to come here today and to testify on this incident. And your just the willingness to put this out, I think, is bringing out a lot of other comments from people around the state. You know, it was mentioned multiple times in the meeting with Director Hertel, and, you know, this one-off incident, you know, looking at a single incident. Do you believe that this is the only incident like this happening in Michigan?
Absolutely not. We have 2 other cases in Monroe County.
No.
Do you feel that this case that you had with these children and this grandfather and his mother was unique to Monroe County?
No, sir.
And do you think the response from CPS, as you mentioned, excuse me, that you've received multiple calls and emails from people around the state, do you think that the response from CPS is unique in this case?
No, sir.
When Director Hertel was here in the committee, she mentioned that the individuals were in a living facility, and then she found out they were no longer there. Can you describe what kind of facility, or because she obviously, as Representative Regas had mentioned, she I don't know whether she knew or refused to acknowledge that they were put into safety by your folks, by the church there in Monroe, a nonprofit, helped this family out to get them out of the tent and squalor, as it was called. What happened after that?
So, just so that we're clear, our encounter with them in 2025 was with them living in a car. And just some history on this is they went from the tent to homeless shelter living, and I'm not going to mention names, and then to another shelter. They thought they had living arrangements with a family in Toledo. They packed up and left that facility, and when they arrived in Toledo, they didn't have room and wouldn't let them live there. That's when they went back to living in their car at I-75 and La Pleasance Road at a park and ride.
But you had mentioned CPS, a caseworker was assigned to this family. So they're going from shelter to shelter to Toledo to a car. Yeah, I might be off a little bit on some of that, but they're going to different places. CPS is involved, but she said we had no idea that they were not in the shelter any longer.
Yes, sir. There's been a case number generated for every interaction with us, and my question there is, where's the oversight? Pick up the phone. She has a cell phone. Call her. How are you doing? You don't have to even leave wherever you're at to make a phone call. How are you doing?
And when that CPS case is established with that number, it's a tracking number, I'm assuming you can find that number, that case number, and there should be a lot of details under that case number.
I would hope, that's what we do with our case numbers from the law enforcement perspective. You put that case number in, you can see all written documents, you can see case journals, and you can get a clear understanding of what's going on with that case. I have those three numbers. They're all three documented in our official law enforcement reports that were generated on each contact.
So for a caseworker not to have a clue where this family is I see that as a problem. I am assuming you do as well.
Again, I don't know what their tracking or their recording mechanism is or are. If they don't have it, I suggest they come into the 21st century and garner it.
Well, we do appreciate your testimony. Now, I only know of one DHHS employee that got fired, and that was Shanta Butler, who was a whistleblower. Do you know of anyone that was reprimanded in this case or any other cases around the state?
I do not, and I'm going to go out on a limb. You know, the same thing occurs if someone makes a complaint against our staff. We just report back that the matter's been handled because it's an employer-related issue, and I don't expect to have that. I'm not here today, or I wasn't here earlier this year, to have somebody get fired. All I'm asking for is there's a systemic problem, fix it. If the laws are not there to support the outcomes that are desired, then change them. I can tell you with confidence, you know, I've heard people say, well, the laws don't support removing the children. But I can tell you there's case after case after case where children have been removed from their parents for far less supportive data. And again, I started out, we're here to represent those victims that don't have a voice of their own, regardless of whether it's children in a CPS case or victims of other criminal activity. That is my job as the sheriff, is to make sure their voices are heard and changes are made. And I still extend my offer to Director Hertel. My door is open. Convince me that she is going to put a mechanism in place so that this failure doesn't happen again. I will tell you, since my first testimony, I have had calls from Kalkaska, Flint, Grand Rapids. The week does not go by when I don't get a phone call from a citizen saying, I saw your testimony and I have had like concerns with CPS. And I listen to their story and I direct them to the appropriate agencies to hopefully seek answers.
Okay, have one more
One
question.
more. Yep, got a couple other questions.
During testimony, I was questioning Director Hertel. Multiple times I had to ask the same question. If this was a foster family, would have action been taken? And she avoided, and finally she said, yes, if this was a foster family, foster kids living in squalor, living in a tent, living with lice, covering their bodies, action would be taken. My question to you is there a difference between, I'll say child abuse or horrible conditions between a foster family and whether there's a parent, or in this case, it was a grandfather living with the kids in the tent, if I'm correct. What's the difference there? Should they look at these the same? Why would that set of standards not be okay for a foster child, but it's okay for a real child? I hate to use that word, but living with a relative to be living in those conditions. Isn't it the same?
Rep. Bruck, I think if you look up standard in the dictionary, it says standard. Standard is standard is standard. It's like uniformity. It's across the board. Everything is consistent.
All right. Well, I appreciate what you're doing each and every day, Sheriff Goodnough. Thank you for being here, sir, and it's an honor to call you my sheriff, sir.
Thank you, Representative Bruck. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Sheriff, for being here again. I wanted to ask, you said that the first 2 times that there was calls, you were not aware of the incidents, correct?
The first one I was unaware of. The second call on December 10th, I was aware of it on the 11th through an email communication that was sent to our entire command staff, just aware of it. Keep in mind, we handle many, many calls a day. I don't get my fingerprint on each one of them. But when a lieutenant and sergeant comes to me as the sheriff and says, Houston, we have a problem. And that's funneled to me through the chain of command. There's a problem. There's a problem.
So, thank you for that clarification. So there's not a report written up that you look at, or do you have briefings every morning on the calls and incidents that happened the day before? And I have another question. So could you also describe the conditions that you saw these children in? I know we're not going to see a video because that's, we got to keep that, you know, we got to protect the children. But I want you to describe in detail the conditions each time officers went out and got the call and found the family and found the children in these conditions.
So Rep. Miller, thank you for the question. If I could start with your first question. Yes, I get a daily briefing every 12 hours from the previous shift. They highlight high-level stuff. They don't highlight everything. I mean, there was a month ago, we ran 100 calls for service in 12 hours. They can't put all that in. So it's high-level stuff. So there's a high probability those first two cases were like, hey, this is a situation, CPS is involved, we think they're gonna do their job, and we're gonna resolve this issue. So I wouldn't expect to be briefed on that. But when the April 16th incident did appear, that's when I was shown, it was brought to my attention about the November 30th case. They refreshed my memory with the December 10th, 2024 case, and then the April 16th case, they verbally briefed me on that, provided pictures of all the two situations, the tent situation, and I physically saw the children when they were brought into our office. They had not bathed in a considerable amount of time. We actually had to decontaminate the room they were in because of the severity of lice. As I had mentioned, the family was put up in a motel. After a couple of days, they were transferred to a woman's shelter. And again, I'm trying not to get into too much detail here.
So if I can ask one more question. So is it your opinion that the Director Hertel, has been an issue for you in the past as well?
I'm sorry,
with
ma'am, I
calls?
did.
So have you had incidents where you've gotten these calls where the director hasn't responded?
Ma'am, I've never had conversation with the director. I have
Well, I'm
never.
saying with the agency, have you ever had incidents where you couldn't get the results, you couldn't get the kids taken out for whatever the circumstance? Or was this a isolated case here?
Ma'am, this is not an isolated
Okay.
case. And if I could go into a little detail,
Sure.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So we've had, as I said earlier, 3 documented incidents over a short period of time since this situation occurred. We had a man living in, again, I know this is adult protective services, but in my opinion, they fall under the same umbrella. We had a man living in a home that had not changed his clothes in 10 years, had not bathed. The roof was falling in. I have pictures of that too. And when Adult Protective Services went out there and said, we can't tell people how to live, okay? We went to the courts. I testified in probate court to get an immediate pickup order to get the man out of the home for fear that if that home was to catch on fire, keep in mind, it had no utilities, but at one time he had had a small space heater running off a propane tank. And I'm more than happy to show this committee those pictures. And I testified in probate court. We got an order to remove him out of there. Today, the man is living in assisted living and doing very, very well. And in fact, thanked us for stepping in and taking charge of this. Again, I had to make numerous calls to different individuals at CPS personally, and they just said there's only so much. Now, I will give credit to the one supervisor that I spoke to. He said, well, I'm not supposed to authorize payment, but I'll give you payment to put this gentleman, almost 80 years old, into a motel. And then we, the sheriff's office, arranged to have food delivered. We literally picked it up from our senior center 3 times a day and delivered it to this man. Again, I'm going to give you a phrase I don't like, But I don't know that that's my job. But at the end of the day, it's my job to make sure services are rendered. But there's a lot of people making a lot of money that aren't holding up their end of the stick. And our men and women of the sheriff's office religiously went for over 2 weeks to the senior center and got meals for this gentleman, clothing, until we could transition him into a better living condition.
Thank you.
Representative Menser.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, Sheriff. My question is kind of similar to Representative Miller's. So you've given us 2 examples here today of horrendous cases that you have contacted DPS for and that DPS didn't basically follow through. You mentioned the number of phone calls that you've been getting from other cities, other locations, other departments with the same type of issue, the failure to follow through by the DPS. So it appears to me that this is a systemic problem within the DPS. I am shocked that this has been allowed to continue for as long as it has, and that somebody who is supposed to be in charge of our most vulnerable citizens, an 80-year-old man and a bunch of children, turns a blind eye to it. I think that we need to have some discussion about what we're going to do about the director. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. We do have another slide I'd like Casey to run, if he doesn't mind.
I am unfamiliar. There was transitional housing prior to living in the automobile. They were in a shelter.
But they're living in a car.
The shelter placement was no longer viable.
Okay,
But
thank
they
you.
did take advantage of the resources, and they did move into a shelter.
Okay,
The family was given resources, which they followed up on. So we know that they were looking to make improvements to the situation that we see here.
but they didn't know they were living in a car?
Not until another referral came in. So we were not aware that the shelter placement didn't work out. And the reason for that is that we didn't have an ongoing case with the family. If we have the ability to come in and have an eligibility specialist, FRS, a family resource specialist working, we're able to open a case when they do those applications, if they're getting benefits, and then continue to work with those families through those cases to make sure that they're getting the supports that they need, that they're looking for. And really importantly for the family, they know they have somebody that they can call at the department when they have questions or concerns, or when they think they might need something.
And I'm sorry, why wasn't that done in this case?
That's a great question at the end there, Representative. So there was a statement made by Director Hertel that poverty is not neglect, right? That was said by the director. And I don't know your number of years of service, but I'm certain it's significant enough to give a professional opinion on the things you have observed over your years. How would you describe what was witnessed by yourself and your deputies? Would you describe that as neglect?
Neglect by the family or CPS?
I mean, it's not a funny topic, but that's exactly probably the right question. Would you first say there was neglect by CPS?
Absolutely.
And would you say that the conditions that those children were, my word here, forced to live in because of the circumstances, under other examples would have been deemed to be neglectful?
Mr. Chair, I get complaints on animals living in conditions that are better than what was reported there,
Yeah.
because I do oversee Animal Control Division in Monroe County. And if I could just share
Sure.
a couple things with you, please. I know Representative Regas asked, one of the investigators, ma'am, was Agent Williams. That was from the case on December 10th of 2024. And if I could, sir, share a couple CPS, I earlier testified that we're given a number anytime that central intake is contacted. I have 3 reports in front of me, and one of those numbers was 106-44-9445, and that was documented from the incident on November 30th, and the incident on April 16th of this year was documented in report to central intake in 156-73-1714. And I think it's important to share, and I mentioned this the last time I testified. There's a report that's called a LENS, L-E-N-S. It's a law enforcement notification system report. Anytime that we initiate a complaint or somebody initiates a complaint with Child Protective Services. Frequently, we are the notification agency to CPS of a situation, and we get a LENS report saying you need to investigate this. In fact, we had a CPS case that was generated by one of our school resource officers. The LENS was complete, or the notification to CPS was made, and there were 7 agencies notified of a LENS. A small police agency that was near the school district. We received 2 or 3 of the same reports. Where's the oversight, folks? Because it's taken a lot of time and resources from law enforcement. When I say law enforcement, local law enforcement, Michigan State Police, and sheriffs, when we get multiple complaints, we have to spend time looking into these. We take these reports seriously because we know the outcomes are tragic if we don't. I have to ask Director Hertel, where's the oversight? Simple task.
Representative Miller, go ahead.
Look, it's heartbreaking to hear what those kids endured. It is. But you said where's the oversight? This is the oversight right here, all of us. And we've heard through the months, many departments coming forward, but nothing as tragic as this. We need to do something, not just hear testimony, not just hear the case, but give some type of recommendation or referral. We can't just let this move on. We need to have some type of action in place. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Representative Miller. First thing, Sheriff Goodnough, I'm going to say to you, thank you for taking the time again to come here. But part of the reason we wanted you to come here and testify was because I believe that it's fair to hear both sides of a story. It's fair to hear individuals' takes. And then we as legislators have to look at the information that's provided to us, measure motive, measure desire, measure whys and whats, and then to the point that Minority Vice Chair Miller just made, make policy decisions or recommendations to correct the direction we're headed. So I just want to sum it up with just a really quick final question to make sure that it's clear to the public, it's clear to the legislature, it's clear to the governor. You were made aware of this case. The state agency, when they were notified initially, basically walked away from that case. And would you just answer 3 simple questions for me? Who got the kids out of the car, ultimately?
The sheriff's office.
Who got the kids out from under the tarp?
The sheriff's office.
And who ultimately got that family into a place of safety?
Initially, the sheriff's office.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate the work you do in the law enforcement that also supports the things you do throughout our state. We can't thank you enough for that. And I'm so glad that we have people like you that are in communities with a motivation that is simply driven by doing good as opposed to building kingdoms. in furthering their financial well-being or their political clout. So thank you for your testimony. Thank you for what you do. Please take that message back to your deputies on behalf of the Oversight Committee and know that we are going to move forward and act on this. I can't thank you enough.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm not here to get accolades. And I appreciate the thank yous. That's not what I'm here for.
I understand.
I want to see change, and I want to see outcomes. And if I could just add one comment.
Certainly.
This situation was very easy on April 16th. Mom's own testimony is, I can no longer take care of my kids. What more do we need? I don't need a law when somebody says, we can take a newborn to a police or fire station and surrender them without question. I know that doesn't fit into that same square box, but Mom said, I can no longer adequately care for my children. What part of that phrase, in the terms of law enforcement, that's like somebody's giving consent, search my house. And to law enforcement, that opens the door for us. Again, I'm not in the CPS world, but I can tell you, those are words that we want to hear when somebody says, I can't. So you take the children from there. They're living comfortably right now. They're in school. They're being taken care of. Mom is struggling. Last time I spoke with her, she's struggling. But there's some other outlying factors that's not my position to share. But you asked what I want, outcomes, no accolades. I just want to be the guy behind the scenes, and we get things done for the benefit of not just the citizens of Monroe County, the citizens across this great state, and the victims that don't have a voice.
Sheriff Goodnough, thank you. Thank you for taking the time and being here in your testimony. Representative Bierlein?
Mr. Chair, I move that we reconsider the vote by the proposed committee rule was not adopted.
Representative Bierlein makes that motion. Will the clerk take the roll to reconsider?
On the motion to reconsider, Chair DeBoyer.
Yes.
Representatives Bierlein. Yes. Meerman. Yes. Paquette. Yes. Cara. Yes. Bruck. Yay. Green. Regis. Yes. Shriver. Yay. Wolford. Miller.
Yeah, that's confusing. Pass.
Pohutsky. No. Conlon.
No.
McDonald. No. Menser.
No.
Cerniglu. No. Wagella. Miller.
No.
Mr. Chair, you have 9 yeas, 7 nays, 1 pass. The motion is reconsidered.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We're now going to take testimony. Oh, I'm sorry.
You have to take the second half here.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Correct. The question on the Representative Regis's motion to adopt the proposed rules, will the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to adopt, Chair
that.
DeBoyer.
Yes.
Representatives Bierlein. Yes. Meerman. Yes. Paquette. Yes. Cara. Yes. Bruck. Yay. Green. Regis. Yes. Shriver. Yay. Wolford. Yay. Miller.
No.
Pohutsky. No. Conlon.
No.
McDonald. No. Menser. No. Cerniglu. No. Wagella. No. Mr. Chair, you have 9 yeas, 7 nays, 1 pass. The motion does prevail.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We will move to testimony from Jill Bable, a Chief Prosecuting Attorney from Marquette County. I believe Madam Prosecutor has some interesting information she wishes to share with us to give us further information on interactions with Child Protective Services. Floor is yours.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you for having me here today. I've been trying to get the ear of somebody for a very long time. A little bit about who I am in regard to this system. I am the Chief Assistant Prosecuting Attorney for Marquette County. I've been in a prosecuting attorney role with Marquette County for 12 years. I started off in the Family Support Division, and then I moved on to the Abuse and Neglect docket. On that docket, I was in charge of any case that involved children doing bad things or bad things being done to children. I also handled numerous felony cases that were companion cases with these abuses. I also teach. I taught at Northern Michigan University for 3 years in criminal procedure, and I teach at the Police Academy every year for the last decade. I just want to let you know a little bit about Marquette County. I know that up in the UP, we kind of seem distant to everyone down here in Lansing, and I know that because I actually grew up in Macomb and Oakland counties. I moved up to the UP in 2005, and I've been there ever since. What you need to know about Marquette County is that there are good, hardworking people up there that care. I live in Marquette City. It has a population of about 68,000 people. It's the biggest city in the UP. The interesting thing about Marquette County is we see the same things that you guys see down here in Lansing. We see the crimes that you see. We have murders, we have methamphetamine, we have armed robberies, we have carjackings, and we have child abuse. And we see the same things. The difference we have up there that you don't have down in the more bigger cities is that we know all the people. In the time that I've worked for the prosecuting attorney's office, I actually know these kids, I know these families, I know these parents. So it gives me a unique view where I can sit there and I can see what's really happening, even though we're dealing with the same things. Now, with that being said, I also sit in a unique position because as prosecuting attorney's office, we have to represent DHHS in abuse neglect cases where we remove children or we go into in-home and get services for children in a formal docket. The difference with Marquette County, though, is that some time back, DHHS wanted many of the counties to sign contracts in order to represent them. Marquette County refused. Marquette County wanted to have their autonomy when it came to these cases, because if the department decides that they aren't appreciating our service or we have a major disagreement, they can get their own counsel, but the prosecuting attorneys still get a seat at the table. You need to know that because I do function in a way that I kind of represent the department in these cases, but I kind of don't. And my first and foremost is the oath that I swore to protect the people of the state of Michigan, and that's including our children. The children are the ones that I care the most about. I love all the people, don't get me wrong, but it's the kids. And I have made it an absolute passion of mine to look out for them. I've heard you talk about this case with regard to this tent family, and I've heard the outrage from this county, this case out of Monroe County. And the sheriff was good enough to say that he has 2 more cases. I have dozens of cases where I feel the department has failed. I have started a letter back in 2020 when one particular case caught my eye, and I was wondering what is happening. And I gotta tell you, it has gotten worse. Since the time that I had actually talked to Representative Meerman, I've had 4 new cases that I have found a complete failure to protect children. The sheriff mentioned that there needs to be laws in place to protect children. There are. They're being interpreted poorly and wrong. And when they're called on it to say that they're interpreting them wrong, we're ignored. I have the child protection law here. You need to understand, for CPS to get involved, or for us to file a petition to remove children, or even just get services in-home formally, we need to show that the children are put in a situation that is a substantial risk of harm or an immediate threat of harm. I don't think it takes much for you to look at those pictures of that tent and say those children were in a substantial risk of harm. That is being ignored. One of the things that I saw in previous committee meetings is that we cannot remove children when it comes to drug abuse. That is true. We cannot remove children out of homes where there's drug abuse. However, if that drug abuse is directly impacting our children and putting them at risk, we can, and that is being ignored. The department sees, oh, there's drug use, let's get them a service and call it a day. It doesn't need to be like that. We can get the kids out of there if they're in dangerous conditions. I'm not talking about, marijuana use. I'm talking about methamphetamine drug houses. The case that brought me into where I started keeping track of everything back in 2020 was a drug house. I started this letter that I wrote and I sent to Representative Meerman. He has it, he can copy it, you can all get copies. But I started that letter 5 years ago. This particular case, there were 2 RVs parked out front of a main house. There was a traffic stop. There was drugs found in that traffic stop. And then the person started talking about all the things that were happening back at the house. When they went back to the house, the police showed up with a search warrant. That search warrant led to 2 RVs being searched as well as a main house. There were 8 or 9 children there. The children were supposedly living in one of the RVs, but would go up to the, quote, main house to eat or do anything like that. I actually have pictures. I will leave them for you to look at. They're pictures of the RVs and of the main house. What was found, though, you'll see in the pictures, that the living arrangement in the RVs were not appropriate for 9 children to be living in. Now, there were 2 RVs, I only have pictures of one. At the main house, it was found when they walked in, a table filled with drug paraphernalia and guns, and people that were there admitted to using methamphetamine, smoking it around the children. They were directly exposed to this. Now, the police had a tremendous amount of cleanup that day, so they didn't call CPS right away. They called a couple days later. Nothing was done. I believe that CPS went out and met with the family. They determined that the children were now in a safe place because they were staying with relatives at the time since the house had been raided, and they let it go. I contacted them and I asked them, don't let this go, but they did. After that day, we had a traffic stop a year later. So the original search warrant was on August 11th, 2020. In January of 2021, the father was pulled over and the children were found, a couple of the children were found in the car with him with methamphetamine. CPS did not move in to remove it at that time. I then started talking to law enforcement, and on February 6, 2021, there was another search warrant executed. They broke into now where they lived in an apartment, and they found all the children there. There were 9 children at the time, 2 mothers who were sisters, and 1 father. And the majority of the children had methamphetamine exposure, and 2 of the children were found to be using methamphetamine at the age of 14 and 11. We did get the kids out of there at that time, but the only way we got them out of there is because we had law enforcement take them into protective custody, which law enforcement can in fact do. They can say, we're not letting these kids go back, and that will trigger things to happen. However, there have been times that I have seen where the law enforcement has taken the children into protective custody, and the law enforcement is then left there to babysit. We had troopers actually babysitting an infant for 24 hours while they waited for something to happen, where they had to go out and buy diapers and formula to care for the child, because law enforcement is not getting the assistance they need when they're out on these scenes. And these scenes can be quite hectic. I did see some of the testimony, and I know a couple of my cases were brought up by Representative DeBoyer. I'd like to address those cases if I could. One of those such cases is this alleged meth box. We have a case where we have a father who was determined to not be an appropriate placement for his teenage daughter. He's working reunification to get his kid back. However, he continues to microdose with methamphetamine, saying it's for his mental health. I can assure you that there is no medical proof that this helps whatsoever. In a safety plan that was developed through a team decision-making meeting, it was determined that he was to lock up his methamphetamine, illegal substances, or prescriptions in a lockbox while the teenage child came for unsupervised parenting time. This was typed up in a meeting with a prosecutor who did not agree with this, and several workers, as well as somebody from Lansing. This came in front of our judge, and our judge was obviously in disagreement with this because it's crazy. The judge had an entire hearing about this matter where she read the entire safety plan into the record, which is why I can bring it up to you now because it's part of public record. I do have that transcript with me today. At that point, the judge said that she would not agree with this plan, and she asked if it was in fact typed up by Lansing. And I have it on very good authority that the judge actually contacted higher ups in Lansing, higher than our local level, to advise that this meth box thing has been approved. I found it in another case. This time they didn't directly say methamphetamine, they just said substances, but it means the same thing. The Marquette County Prosecuting Attorney's Office would not support any such thing, and I wrote an email in regard to this to one of the CPS supervisors, where I stated that as a law enforcement agency, we will not support, nor will we condone anybody committing a 10-year felony, which is what methamphetamine is. Just possession is a 10-year felony. I was contacted back where I was told that we misunderstood what it said. I then typed the exact words where it said methamphetamine, illegal substances, and medications, and typed it back and said, I don't think I misunderstand this. And once again, I am not going to sign off on anything where government officials tell someone they can commit a crime. It should be noted that since that time, the father has had a drug bust at his house where he was in fact found in possession of methamphetamine, and there is now a pending felony. The other case I wanted to bring up that came to my attention very recently.
Madam Prosecutor? We have a technical thing we have to do
You have to
right
go
now.
for session.
We have to go check in, but then we're going to come right back, and then we're going to let you carry on. I apologize for that inconvenience to you, but
okay.
we are going to give you all the time you need. It's just a technical matter under the rules that we have to do. So I would ask members to go and check in immediately and return back to the committee room. And we are going at ease at the call of chair. We have leave, we can meet.
That went faster than I was afraid of.
The House Oversight Committee will come back to order, and we will continue with testimony from Madam Prosecutor.
Thank you.
Apologize for that inconvenience there.
I know, we have business to do. I think I was starting to talk about a case involving, so the representatives are aware, when children are removed from a home, unless there is extreme physical abuse or some aggravated or sexual abuse or some aggravating circumstances, the parents have some time to correct the things that brought the children into care and get their children back. Sometimes that's programming, sometimes drug screens, you know, whatever they determine the safety plan is appropriate. However, after a period of time, usually in Marquette County, it's about a year, if the barriers have not been rectified and there's no reasonable likelihood to believe that the barriers can be rectified, their parental rights are terminated. That is a finding by the court with clear and convincing evidence that it is in the child's best interest and there's no reasonable likelihood the barriers are going to be taken over. You need to understand that for this next case. In this case, out of the counties of Delta and Schoolcraft, it wasn't even Marquette County that originally did this, there was a case with a child who was brought into the care of the court because the father actually broke one of the child's bones with regard to physical abuse in the home. The parents' rights were terminated. Both the mother's and the father's rights were terminated. I believe the father's rights were terminated in Delta County and the mother's rights were terminated in Schoolcraft County. The child came to live in Marquette County in a foster care placement. The child has significant needs and trauma and acts out occasionally, and so he found his way onto the juvenile delinquency docket in our court. When we went in to talk about the malicious destruction of property that this child had done, during the hearing, it was found that the child was actually living with his biological parents. When questioned about this, the department stated that they had nowhere else to put him. They said that on the record. So they placed the child back in the home with the abuser that actually broke one of his bones as a child, and that is where the children is living. I know that there was testimony at a previous hearing that if a parent has a substance abuse problem and then gets better after 5 years, they may consider placing the child back there, even though the rights have been terminated, which I have a lot of questions about because why are we doing it at all then if we're not going to keep the kids away from them? But This was not one of those cases. This child was placed back with his physical abuser and is living there right now. I do have the court record of that. However, I don't have the transcript typed up. It's just a USB drive, and it's back at my office. Sorry, I forgot it in Marquette. It would take a while to get back there, get it. So those are the cases that the Representative DeBoyer brought up, but there's more. I do want to make the representatives aware that I had spoke with 3 previous CPS workers prior to coming here who no longer work for CPS. I let them know what I was doing and why I was coming. I asked them if they would want to come and join me. Initially, one of them was very interested. However, in her current, well, I should say all 3 of them are in current positions that have something to do or some sort of ties with the Department of Health and Human Services. One of them wanted to come. However, she was directly told she is not allowed to participate in this. And the only way she could testify in front of you was with a subpoena. She's also had a reprimand written up because she spoke illy of the department. The other 2 also do not want to come because they are afraid of retaliation. Even though they're not directly working for the department anymore, they kind of are, and I don't want to say exactly where they're working because I don't want to give them up. But they too are afraid of retaliation. I can tell you that one of the workers told me the reason why she left was because she was no longer allowed to protect children, and that the department's interests no longer aligned with her own. I can tell you she also said that she was told not to file petitions because they wanted to make it look like their programs were working. Another worker told me that she was told not to file petitions because they had nowhere to put children. And unless she could line up a place to put the kids, she was not allowed to remove children. 2 of the workers have told me that the problem with the department is the main part is there's no accountability. If something happens, there's no one to tell. We did have the ombudsman's office, which is now the child advocate office, and it was utilized by these workers that have left CPS from time to time. So if you went back and talked to that office, they could probably get you some of the records of some of the cases that were called in prior. They talked to me about how no accountability is held. If they have a problem internally, they can't go anywhere to report it. It has to stay internally. I'm not going to get into some of the accusations that they made. I can just tell you what they told me on the phone, and I told them I would relay the message. But they can't be here in person because they have jobs and they need to worry about those jobs and their families. I can tell you that it hasn't gotten better. We have a crisis in care. There was a Detroit Free Press article written, I have it in my binder if you need it, about the crisis in care. We have nowhere to put children, nowhere at all. We are coming up with really creative means to try to get children placed in safe environments. We're using things such as fictive kin. We're placing children back with their abusers. We're not removing them to begin with. We have a crisis in care. I have some ideas of how we can solve that, but I can tell you that due to this fact, things are happening that are not protecting children. I have one such case. It happened in 2022 where we had a juvenile girl who was about 16 years old leave her foster home and go downstate with a gentleman. I use that term incredibly loosely. Over the period of time that she was with this man, he sexually trafficked her for days on end. I have the police report that shows what happened to this poor girl during the time that she was with this man. This man told her that she had to leave the house or he was going to come in and kill her foster family. He also directed her to steal $200 out of her foster mother's house, or he was going to kill the foster family. She went. She was sexually trafficked for several days. When she was returned, CPS contacted me and wanted me to authorize juvenile delinquency charges on her for runaway and larceny because they had nowhere to put her. The chief of police that took this call said, absolutely not, I'm not submitting charges on this young lady. She's a victim, and I won't do it. I said, can you send me the report, just because I want to know. I read the report. It's heartbreaking. I'll spare you. It's some of the most awful things I could possibly imagine happening to a young lady. I refused also to authorize or request a petition on those charges because she is in fact a victim, and the reason why she left was because of duress. The department contacted me again, trying to talk me into filing those charges. We took a very hard stand. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to further victimize a child. That's not my job. We also had another case where child abuse charges were authorized. The representatives, you should know that if a child abuse first degree or second degree is authorized in the criminal court, it triggers the department to file a petition. That's mandatory filing. I authorized child abuse second charges on a case. I was contacted by the department. They asked me to change my charges. I said no. They also asked me if they could get the no contact order lifted so the child could go home. I said no. They asked if they could come to court and request it. I said, you don't have standing. They asked, who do I talk to? I said, me. They wanted me to lift it. I said no. I found that highly inappropriate for the department to be butting in to my job as a prosecutor and criminally prosecuting people. And they did that because they didn't want to file a mandatory petition. I have that police report as well. I can also tell you that law enforcement gets absolutely no support from them. And I can say that not just Marquette. This is not a one-off. This is not a bad county. And in fact, we have really great DHS workers in our county. We have some that really care. So this is not just a county base, and I know that because when I do legal updates around the UP, I hear it from every single other county in the UP that they are also not supported by CPS. They have to call centralized intake to get any help whatsoever. It's a very long process. I've witnessed body cam where I've seen somebody in the heat of a domestic violence issue with young children running around, and they're on the phone with centralized intake. You gotta remember, we're a rural area. Sometimes there's only one cop there for a long time before we can get any help. And they're on the phone with centralized intake trying to get somebody out to help those kids, and they have to go through all these questions. What are their birthdays? What are the maiden names? What are all, tons of questions, and they're sitting there with a very highly volatile situation and children running around. They need to just be able to call a line and say, I need you here now, and they're deployed, but that's not how this works. They have to go through centralized intake. Then centralized intake will decide if it should be screened out or assigned. And they do that. And a lot of times they'll screen it out. One such case, which is not in my letter, there's several cases that are not in my letter. I had a phone call in the middle of the night by Marquette City Police of a mother that was overdosing on heroin. The phone call came in from her young son. He called 911 to get help. They said that they did bring her back. It took 3 hits of Narcan to bring her back. I said, is CPS there? No. Have you contacted CPS? Yes. I tried to call CPS myself at 2 o'clock in the morning and I was unable to get through to anybody. But in the morning I did reach out and I called our local office and I said, hey, you know, this happened last night. Are you going to get out there and check it out, make sure the family doesn't need services, make sure mom's okay? And they said, it was screened out. It was not assigned. And I said, why? And they said, well, it wasn't a parent who OD'd. I'm like, that's false. It was the mother. And then they said, well, the child wasn't present. I'm like, that's false. I have a 911 call that would say differently. I just listened to it. They said, well, they determined that this wasn't appropriate. I took it upon myself to file a petition on my own because prosecutors do have standing to do that. However, when I filed that petition and we went into court, the department decided they still didn't want to follow up on it. The judge ordered them to review the matter. They did. They also found that they didn't agree with me. I had to dismiss my petition. Now, one thing I can tell you is that that was a one-off for that mom, and it is a circumstance that is rather unique. And actually, her and her child are doing okay now, so we're all right there. But it just fell on deaf ears. Law enforcement can't get people out there. I told you about them taking care of babies. Well, we had one case where law enforcement called CPS because an infant had died. And the officers were with the grieving parents, and they needed CPS to come out. It was nothing nefarious. It was an unsafe sleep situation, but as any parent on this panel knows, sometimes we fall asleep with our babies. But they had to wait for CPS to come out before they could clear. After 2 hours of waiting, they contacted me. I contacted somebody. I found out that it was just assigned and they would get someone out there. It was still a couple more hours before CPS arrived. And that's with the dead baby and grieving parents. Our law enforcement is desperate to have someone out there to help them to get their back. Law enforcement has told me that they get phone calls from CPS all the time for standbys or assistance, and they show up and they jump when they're told to jump, but they do not get the same regard in the other way. There are times where the department and the prosecutor's office do not agree. It's becoming more frequent lately. One such time was when they were placing children on a case where a petition was filed. They wanted to place these children with the biological father of the children. I said I did not support that because I had an open and an active felony case against the father for criminal sexual conduct in the 3rd degree with a child under the age of 16. I didn't feel that that was an appropriate place for children, especially since I was trying to put him in prison. They disagreed with me. I told them that I would not stand with them on that, and they had to contact their own private counsel. And they agreed with that, and they said, well, he hasn't been convicted yet. And I told them, well, I have really good evidence that it happened because a child was conceived out of that crime. They didn't find that that was enough evidence to not place the children with him. Now, it is true that a judge can come in and disagree with placement and take the children out of there and recommend a different placement. And it's kind of true, the fact that funding doesn't get cut off. However, if a judge interferes with placement, Title IV funding does get suspended, and there needs to be paperwork worked out for it to get reinstituted. That's not a necessary guarantee that the funding will continue. So it puts judges in a position where, well, we can try this, but what if we don't get the funding and then the county has to shoulder the cost? So that was another thing that Rep. DeBoyer and I spoke about. And then when I went and followed up on it, that's the circumstances behind it. I have more cases if you would like to hear more horrors, but I think at this point it might be better to turn things over to you. I did write a very lengthy letter with lots of cases, and I have to tell you, there's at least 4 or 5 that didn't make it in there that are going down right now. I just want you all to understand that this one issue, it's not political. It's our children. If we can't agree on our children, I mean, what can we agree on? I can also tell you with my whole heart that this is a systematic problem and has been for quite some time. I only started keeping track of it 5 years ago, but there were some issues prior to, especially with centralized intake. Now, centralized intake could make things a lot easier for Wayne County and Oakland County, but I'm telling you, it's not working for Marquette County, and it's not working for the UP. So we need more money in prevention. We need more intervention earlier on. We need foster parents to be paid adequately. Currently, foster parents are paid about $37 a day. I don't anticipate that's going to end anytime soon. I know you have a very big day.
Probably not. Let's just power through it.
That's fine. I understand. You have a very, very big day today, and I know that a lot of people have a lot of opinions, and I tend to have the most opinions. You can ask anyone, especially the people sitting behind me who are my greatest supports. However, I want to tell you right now that this is not going away. It's getting worse. I'm surprised we don't have dead children in Marquette right now. And I can tell you that law enforcement that I've spoke to agree with me. We need higher payments for foster parents. We need a better system in entirety, and we need some accountability. Because I can tell you right now, there is absolutely no accountability, none. And it's law enforcement and the prosecutor's office, and we're trying to fix things, and we're trying to do things, and we have to do things, basically go rogue in order to protect our kids, and that shouldn't be the way it is. I should be able to make a phone call and know that a kid is safe. I can't do that. So I will welcome any questions at this time, and I have more information if you need it.
Thank you, Prosecutor Bable. I do have an opinion question, and I won't be offended if you say I'd rather not express my opinion on this. I won't be offended at all, but you did mention that it seems that there are good Department of Health and Human Services employees up there, and it seems to me, based on your testimony, that they're following, maybe directive is too strong of a word, but they're following an understood policy.
Yes,
Is that correct?
absolutely.
And would it be at least your opinion that that policy is coming from managers above and running all the way up to the leadership of the administration?
Absolutely. I'm told several times, and the judge has told several times in our hearings, that their policy is based on law. And I can't think of any off the top of my head right now, but we have specific instances where it's actually in conflict with the child protection law. It absolutely is coming down from the top. I've had higher ups, by higher ups, I mean our local supervisors, talk about how they have to kind of turn a blind eye to policy in order to get things done. I have it on the record, actually. So the representatives are understanding everything. I think I have about, I don't know, 12 maybe workers that are boots on the ground workers, and I'm guessing right now, I don't have the list in front of me. For those 12 people, I believe there's 4 supervisors, and for those 4 supervisors, there's another supervisor, and then there's a higher up supervisor, and that's just in our county, and I think it's a multi-county jurisdiction. When someone with their boots on the ground decides it's time to remove children, or maybe just file an in-home petition to get services and eyes in there, they make that decision. They have to go to their supervisor, and then that supervisor has to agree with them. And then they call a meeting with everybody in the office that can attend, and they review it as an entire office and make a determination if that will be done. And they don't leave it to the people with their eyes and the ears and the feels and the face-to-face with the family. It's made from an office. And that's the problem. Because I don't think the people that are sitting in offices right now really know what's happening out there. In fact, I know they don't. The thing that happened in Monroe County is not a one-off. I have a case just like it. I have several.
You know, we demonstrated at a previous committee hearing that the department is extremely top-heavy, meaning individuals are being paid, you know, rather comfortable salaries. I don't begrudge anybody for earning a comfortable salary, but they're being paid rather comfortable salaries, and they don't have direct impact on children's well-being. I guess one more opinion question. We do have some other questions that I want to get to. I don't want to hog all the time here, but, you know, what would be the motivation of an administration that's overseeing the Department of Health and Human Services to ask the, you know, boots on the ground to navigate and operate under these directives?
I don't know. It seems like an overwhelming problem what's wrong here and that it's super hard to fix, but I don't think it is. I think some very minor things can be done to set us on the right path. However, I've had a hard time getting anybody to hear me, which is why I thanked you all for having me here today, because we do have some ideas. And by we, I mean people like me. I'm not the only one. I'm just louder than most.
Okay. We do have a couple of questions. Representative Bierlein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just try to be brief for everybody. Do you see in the types of cases that seem to be, I don't want to say ignored, but they're not giving the attention they need, is there a pattern? Like, is it typically, it's, you know, kids should probably come out because of the drug use that's happening in the house, but the agency is not taking action there? Or is it, you know, it's very neglectful, but it hasn't been abusive? Or is it really across the board?
It's so inconsistent. It's very inconsistent. We have one case where they're not returning children to the biological father because they find him to not be providing nutritionally for them because he fed them buttered noodles. But then on the flip side, we have the case where dad can lock up his methamphetamine. I'm not sure why buttered noodles garners attention and methamphetamine doesn't, but there is a pretty constant about we don't get involved if parents are doing drugs, and it's because it's misunderstood. If those drugs are having a direct impact on the safety and well-being of the children, we can intervene. If mom has a drug problem and drops kids off at grandma's and then uses drugs and then gets sober and come back and get kids, no, we can't do it. It seems silly, but we can't do anything about that according to law. However, if the children are in a drug house, I feel like the law supports us to get involved, but it's very inconsistent. And I never know which cases are gonna be held or not. I can tell you that on average, Marquette County would see probably about 25 to 30 petitions filed a year. And in 2021, 26 petitions were filed. In 2022, 6 petitions were filed. In 23 and 24, 14 petitions were filed. I do have to note that was after I started having my voice heard a little bit, and I was pushing for cases to get filed. And as of right now, I think we've had 8 this year. However, Marquette County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, when I look at the stats, the felonies have not gone down. The domestic violence has not gone down, but yet the petitions have gone down.
In your experience and your networking and throughout the UP, because I would fathom that what's happening there is happening in other places. Is that consistent, that
Yes,
crime is the same,
yes,
requests are the same,
Yes.
petitions are continuing to drop?
yes.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Cara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Joe, for your testimony. It's safe to say that none of us want to see this abuse and neglect, but I guess my question I'd want to ask for you, with all these adverse situations that are out there, is it better for us to respond with how the government gets involved, taking kids away from parents, or would it be better if in the first place, if we had less mental health issues in our society, less cases of neglect and abuse, and a situation in an atmosphere where families are thriving and able to provide for themselves and their families, and we're just not seeing this level of turmoil and chaos in people's lives? Which would be preferable?
All of the above. We need to intervene ahead of time to try to get it so families don't find themselves in these situations. We need more prevention. There's family resource centers popping up across the state that I understand is actually becoming very helpful. We need on the front end and on the back end. The problem is, it seems to me we are more interested in checking boxes off a form than checking on kids. And I think that to solve that problem, you have to get in ahead of time and after. So be there, get those parents, the homeless person should have had preventative. And then afterwards, if they can't do it, then we need to be able to get the kids out of there. So I would say all of the above.
And where possible, though, would you say that it would be better to treat the disease than to deal with the symptoms after abuse and neglect has?
Of course it would. Of course it would. Prevention would always be, but here's the thing. Prevention isn't going to stop at all.
Right.
We have to have a safety net there for when it doesn't work, but prevention would be great.
Well, would you say abuse and neglect is on the rise or not on the rise in recent years?
If you look at the numbers, you would say it's on the decline in this state. However, I would disagree. I see, we charge child abuse 4th degree. For those that don't know, that's a misdemeanor crime. And you can charge that if a child is put in an unsafe situation, basically, where a parent should know that they should probably not have done that and they put their children in harm's way. And we charge it actually with drunk driving cases even sometimes, because if you're driving drunk with your child in the car, then you're putting them in an unreasonable risk of harm. And I can tell you that we've been charging a lot of child abuse and a lot of criminal sexual conduct lately.
So would it be safe to say the number of removals are down from peaks around 4,000, maybe 10, 15 years ago, down to the mid-2,500s for removals, not because there's less of it happening, but because
No.
there's less being removed? That should
Yes.
be because of neglect and abuse.
The crime trend kind of hit a peak and was going on the rise pretty quick there, and then kind of plateaued, but it's still staying pretty high.
Thank you.
As a prosecutor, you have to put cases together,
Yes.
which requires at times you to think, like a criminal. You have to think about what things may motivate, right? You have to think about what the next step may be in order to maybe look for the next piece of evidence that helps close your case. I'm listening to your testimony, and I can't help but wonder, could there be a motivation to paint a greener or better picture than reality actually demonstrates with the actions of Child Protective Services? Is
Yes.
that at least a theory that we should look at to make a determination if that's true or not?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Representative Merriman.
Thank you, Chair DeBoyer. A couple questions, if that's all right. Can you go over again why it's possible for you to come forward and maybe others don't want to have their voices heard or are scared to have their voices heard?
A big reason why I can come forward is because I have a boss that supports me and supports this cause. The Marquette County Prosecuting Attorney's Office is behind me 100% with this. I also have circuit court judges in Marquette County that also support this. We have the probate family court judge who has a lot of strong opinions and preaches them from the bench, but also our custody and divorce circuit court judge has been writing orders recently, and in the footnotes, he's been putting in footnotes of his displeasure with CPS and the department for interfering. I have two of the orders actually where it's a footnote since it's a public record filed with the court. I'd have to say that's the main reason. The other reason is the fact that I am a prosecutor first. I assist, according to the law, we have to be there to help DHHS when they request it. A lot of different counties have decided to get private counsel for CPS, so they're not in a position to come forward because then it's attorney-client privileged. Some counties have signed contracts with CPS. I know one of the reasons why we didn't like the contracts because they're not consistent through every county, and one of ours dictated that we would have to check with DHS what witnesses we wanted to call to prove our case, and if they didn't approve it, we couldn't call them. And we didn't like that because we like to be able to do our cases the way we see fit. So we never signed that contract. So I'm in this quasi role where I do support them, and when we come forward with petitions, well, we're trying to remove kids and get them safe, so yeah, we generally agree on that. It's just getting them there, that's the issue. So I'm in a unique position on that. I'm also in a unique position because, yeah, I talk to all the law enforcement all across the UP when I go do legal updates in the summer, and I teach at the academy, so I'm talking to the cadets, and then I meet their chiefs, and so I hear from them, and I'm able to see things. I've been entrenched in this docket for 9 years. It's the same names. I'm starting to go after people for child abuse and neglect that were children that I had once removed. So I think that's why. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I think the contracts really have clouded the system. When they sign those contracts, they're now at the bidding of DHHS, even in a prosecutor's office, if I understand that right. Could you go into a little bit more detail about placement options and what you've seen in the last couple of years? I guess I'm referring to CCIs,
Sure.
juvenile justice, all that.
We don't have placement options. That's the problem. Our foster families are falling off. We don't have as many foster families as we once did. Part of it is due to payment. It costs a lot of money. I think it's $37 a day you can get as a foster family, and I have a 13-year-old football player that's not even going to feed him, so I don't think that's very realistic. Also, the department, I actually have an email in here from a foster family speaking about how displeased they were with working with the department and how difficult they made it to be a foster family. So I think we're running into some issues there. Some facilities have closed. In the UP, we used to have facilities to take children for secure detention because sometimes kids need oversight. That's a little bit more. Many of them have closed. I know that a couple places down here have closed. I actually had a child placed at Vista Maria, and I was told, I don't know how long the department knew, but I was told the day before it closed that I had to get my kid out of there, and we had to find new placement because they were closing. I don't know if they had more time than I did. I was let in last minute, which led to this child being placed with someone who is not perfect. I appreciate this foster parent stepping up and taking in a high-maintenance child. However, just this past weekend, the child ran away from that home and was found in Ann Arbor. She's from Marquette. We were concerned about some trafficking issues possibly. But it led to, that rushed placement led to that. So there's a lot of reasons. I know that, I believe anyways, that the CCIs were cut like $25 million out of COVID money recently. However, I don't believe any of that money led to any opening of any beds. So we don't have anywhere to put kids. We have to look out of state now. So that's the issue.
And that kind of tracks with a former CPS worker saying to you, they were told, don't remove them unless
Correct.
you have a place for them to go.
Correct.
I guess I did want to point to two things for my colleagues here. On page 9, right at the bottom paragraph, there's a supervisor saying if she had to go rogue to keep kids safe, she would, and you referenced that as well.
Yes.
And then I'll just finish by saying this, and I do have more questions if we get back to it, but just for time's sake, you didn't go into details on page 4 regarding this young lady, this young girl that was trafficked, and I think if my colleagues could at least read the last 2 paragraphs, to me it's something that I just really can't sleep with and really gets me pretty upset. The idea that, you know, this young girl went through this situation and the department is deciding that maybe she needs to get charged for what happened. And it's just so clear in the, report here of what she went through. He's got a gun. He's gonna hurt people if I don't comply. I can't imagine how the department misses that. So if you want to comment it, that's fine, but I'm done with my questioning. I appreciate your time here.
The police report from what happened down while she was gone is actually 19 pages long. It was out of the MSP 6th District headquarters, Grand Rapids area. Some of it is, the who and what's, but the bulk of it's about 16 pages long. She was put in multiple inappropriate sexual positions with multiple people. I will spare you from details.
Representative Wolford.
Thank you, Chair. Ma'am, thank you for being here today. I have 2 questions for you. Number 1, do you think that meth or heroin addicts can be trusted to make sound decisions like locking up their weapons? Second, the law does state that a child can be removed from the home without a court order if CPS believes that it's a dangerous situation. And before you answer that, I'd just like to point out that people that use those drugs that you've mentioned today are 9 times more likely to commit murder or homicide. When you take these drugs, it disrupts your impulses unable to control your thoughts. It has extreme mood swings. It heightens sexual arousal. It brings paranoia, and making decisions just aren't there because it literally physically changes the chemical makeup of the brain.
Correct.
So, and I would also state, I cannot believe we're sitting here having a conversation about people in these situations and these little kids trusting people to lock up their guns. Please answer questions. Thank you.
Correct. So when I talk about drug houses, and I know that's not a technical term, but that's the term we use in law enforcement for the most part. When I talk about drug houses and the risks that are associated surpassing that of just drug use of a parent, what I am speaking about is the weapons. I'm also speaking about inappropriate sexual situations. We had multiple interviews at our child advocacy center where children had witnessed or became victims of the people that come and go in the sexual situations they're put in because it is a drug house. We do have the weapons charges, I think I said that. We also have blatant neglect. I had a child light their microwave on fire because they were trying to feed themselves and their siblings because the parents were too high. No, you can't trust them to lock up a gun when they're in the throes of abuse. If they're actually actively using it, no, I don't think you can. It should also be noted that Marquette their main drug problem used to be more locally based. We had drug houses where they were cooking meth, and that is incredibly dangerous. I removed a mother and her daughter. The mother was 17 and the child was an infant, and I didn't personally, when I say I removed, it's not me personally, it's the system. We removed those two children from their parents back prior to COVID. And within a week, the parents that we removed those children from blew up in a house making methamphetamine. They survived. They went to prison. They're out now. But we don't have those meth cooks anymore. We're getting our supply directly from the cartel, mainly in Marquette, and that opens a whole new host of problems because everybody knows that the cartel is incredibly dangerous. And so there are individuals directly linked to the cartel in Marquette County.
So thank you for that. And I guess last question statement. We have a Director Hertel, as the chair mentioned, runs a $34 billion business. It's in law that they can take these kids if they're in a dangerous position. So either she doesn't know what she's doing, she doesn't care, or she is facilitating child abuse. Thank you for being here.
Yes, just to comment on that one part, CPS, generally law enforcement will take the children into protective care, and then CPS follows up with filing a petition. In order for CPS to actually take the children, they do have to have an order, but there's an emergency order protocol to get things done quicker. And so this committee is aware, you do have to follow through. But I know that in our county, there's always a prosecutor available and there's always a judge available to deal with these situations. I actually answered the phone 20 minutes after my father passed away on one of these issues. So we really do take it very seriously and we look out for our kids.
Representative Shriver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Neglecting neglect. Something that was brought up earlier, something that is really disturbing to me. Case after case, all across Michigan, law enforcement does its job, CPS comes in, and they neglect. True child abuse, child sex abuse, neglect by definition beyond what we all know neglect to be. I'm not sure if you paid attention to, I don't know how long it was ago when we had someone testifying about a situation where a child was left by CPS to then be beaten to death. dead kids. My question to you, as Chief Prosecuting Attorney, what laws are in place to charge CPS workers or even the DHHS Director herself for neglecting neglect?
I don't know any off the top of my head because on a county level, that's not going to be something that I would deal with. So I wouldn't know. All I can comment on is that there's no accountability for what's being done, or I should say what's not being done.
Zero accountability. I can't agree more. This is something that has to be addressed. I want to echo the request of my colleague that we look into this seriously and do something about this. This is very difficult stuff. I really appreciate you being here and testifying and sharing this. This is something we take very seriously, and this has to be just the start.
I really sincerely hope so. I've been collecting this information for a long time, and I'm really happy to have a voice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Bruck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned something that just, literally infuriates me regarding CPS and them requesting either for you to make charges against an individual or dropping charges. There's 14,000 employees in DHHS, largest organization in our state. At what level, who is it that makes a decision to call you as a prosecutor and say, charge this person or don't charge this person because it's going to help us make our job easier? 14,000 employees. Who makes that decision, madam?
I don't know. I have a feeling that the people making those decisions are not the ones that are making the phone calls. Because I have relationships with the people that are making the phone calls. The difference is, I'm going to be very blunt here. The Marquette County Prosecuting Attorney's Office really doesn't care what they think when it comes to charges, because that's not their job, that's our job. And we make those choices and those decisions based on what's written in a police report, not what CPS is telling us to do.
Well, thank you for standing up against the audacity of some of our state employees doing that. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Paquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate you guys being here. I was born and raised in Marquette.
Heard.
It's great to have more Yoopers in this town.
I have to admit, I am not a Youper. I was born in Detroit, so I will always be a troll.
All right, that's all right. Thank you for being up there and your work. There's obviously immense gravity in what you do. When I was in Marquette, my family, took in foster children, did respite care. And I will say that taught me how to be grateful in life when I had all those little brothers and sisters staying with us for a time. With regard to foster families and placements and the drop-off there, how are those rates set for the $37 a day?
I really don't know. I just know that they're not being, and I have to say, when I say $37 a day, I think that's the max we've seen. Some get only like $12, and I don't know. I know that there is protocol in place to determine what amount of money each house gets and for which kid and how much, and high needs kids get more, and there is a whole thing. I don't have that with me because that's not something that I can have any kind of effect on. I just know that it's an issue.
And a follow-up there with, you said there was a letter you had from a foster family and the burden, right? And
correct.
My family was put through the ringer. We tried to adopt a young boy, Gabriel. He was our little brother. He was with us for a long time, and it was a nightmare, right? Our family got put through a legitimate nightmare. And so do you have any recommendations on how to, alleviate some of those burdens for foster families?
Well, I think proper payment would definitely help the foster families. If they're paid a more livable wage. We have a lot of children that are in care right now that are incredibly high needs. They have constant doctor's appointments, therapy appointments, then they have parenting time appointments, and they have all these things. And to expect two working parents to be able to support the needs of those children is kind of unfair. If we could pay our foster families more so that way they can focus on being foster families, I'm not, at least one parent be able to do the appointments with the kids. I think you'd see a big increase. I think you'd see an increase in people wanting to be foster parents. I've actually toyed with the idea myself, which I think would be highly inappropriate because of my position. But when I retire, you know, it's something I'm sure my husband's loving to hear this right now. He's sitting right behind me. But I would consider, you know, opening my house and my home to somebody. But we have the means to do it. So I think with regard to that, we need to pay them more. I think, honestly, if I were to give you some, you know, if I were to give you a plan, you know, and if I didn't have to worry about where the money was coming from or anything, I would say that law enforcement needs a direct line to get immediate assistance. Like maybe an extension. It doesn't cost that much money to put an extension on a phone, right? Where they can press a button and say, I need you here now. And all they have to do is say, where are you? We're coming. And I think if law enforcement had that kind of support, you would see a better relationship between law enforcement and the department right there. And I think that they'd be able to get their jobs done better. I already said prevention, family resource centers, Children's Trust Michigan have a lot of really great ideas when it comes to prevention. I know, I sat on the board. But they have a lot of really good ideas that just need a little help to be implemented. I think paying the foster families more would be huge. I think you would get a response and people would want to do it. And then I think that the department needs some sort of accountability, some sort of maybe internal affairs or anything that we can do that when I run into these situations where I don't like what I'm being told, I can tell somebody. I don't have to write you guys and bother you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative. You know, last question, you touched on something. You brought up physicians, I believe, there. And you know, and this is just in an attempt to at least try to make sure we're working through us. If we talk to the physicians, if we talk to the EMS workers, we already obviously talked to the Sheriff's Department. I mean, are they going to tell us the same thing? Because they're on this front line of protecting children at times too when they get these calls. And I would imagine there's conditions that when a Sheriff's Department shows up at a home, they see conditions that may require EMS to be called, which then perhaps results in, you know, going to the doctor or going to the emergency room. Is this a across these organizations, I'm not trying to make you speak for them, but across these organizations, you know, professionally, is it a common position that you're providing to us from them as well?
Yes, actually, in my letter, there is a case. It's the MW case. If you look in my letter, where I spoke directly with a physician from the hospital up there who was incredibly concerned about this baby going home with the parents and actually stated to me that he would be concerned. I had an RN in that same case tell me that even as a registered nurse, they would not have the capacity to care for this high needs baby and that they did not have a lot of faith that the child would survive if they went home with their existing parents. It's in my letter. There's an example from the NICU as well, yes.
Well, thank you. It's unfortunate that we have to do these things, but we all sitting here in this room kind of signed up for this. And I appreciate you taking the time to come down here. I know it's a little bit of a trip, rep marketing, right? But your work is priceless. And it's necessary, unfortunately. And I do believe there is a consensus on this committee to work through some things to recommend policy decisions, legislative or otherwise, frankly, that will help to move Michigan in a direction that is more positive for the protection of the children. And I hate the fact that we even have to say that, but I think it's very apparent. So thank you for your testimony.
You're welcome.
I appreciate everything you're doing. Appreciate you being here today.
You're welcome. As there's several quotes about the fact that you can judge a society and how they treat their children. And so I would like to see our society do a little better.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you.
Welcome.
There being no further business before the Oversight Committee, the committee stands adjourned.